Okay, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. My name is Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, and I am delighted to be back with you tonight for our, I think, 22nd. I've kind of lost track, not going to pretend. I think 22nd session on the Council of Elrond. Plenty still left to do. Tonight we're getting to an important transitional moment in the council when it's kind of interesting, not only because it's a transition to Gandalf's part of the meeting, but it's also interesting because we're coming to a place where we're going to lapse out of the close attention. So I remember there was a time at the beginning when we were just getting a kind of a summary of things, right? Like lots of people talked about lots of things and whatever, right? And then we got to Elrond's story. And then of course we've been doing full speeches and hearing everything as it happens for a while. This is going to be now another portion of the meeting where we're just going to get a summary of a bunch of things that are kind of going on. So that's where we're going to start here tonight. And the investigations that are being done by folks, that is like people querying things. And I think it's important to remember, of course, some of the observations we were making about Boromir, especially in those places where Boromir seemed to be kind of pushing back against Aragorn and Elrond and stuff. And I think that we need to keep these sort of next bits in mind about the question. Valamoinen, you're absolutely right that our passages today will be fraught with summary. That is absolutely correct. So anyway, all right. So let's jump into it. So one quick thing, however, before we start, just to remind you that our Signum Path registration is open. If you go to path.signumuniversity.org, you'll be able to see our Signum Path page. I've been announcing that for a little while now, and I talked about it a good deal last week. I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot again, but I definitely wanted to commend that to you. You can look up Signum Path, just P-A-T-H. You can search us on Google. You can find us on Facebook or on LinkedIn as well. And you can get a direct link to our site and look at our upcoming courses. Registration is open. And that's been really exciting. So yes, there it is in Mubot there for those of you who are in Twitch. So just wanted to commend that to you. We have our very first classes being offered here in June, but we are of course offering them monthly moving forward. You can see right now on our website is the schedule for the courses being offered in June, July, and August, and then we will repeat them from there. Thank you, Druid's Fire, for pasting the link there into the Discord chat as well. That's very helpful. So anyway, really excited about the PATH program. Have had a bunch of good conversations with folks about PATH, and I look forward to seeing that program move forward. There's a lot of opportunities here, I think. I am excited for Signum to get a chance to be a help to a lot of people, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy these classes and really benefit from them in their careers moving forward. So, all right. Let us jump back into the text, therefore. So last week, we talked about casting spells, as I saw several of you remembering, of course, in the the discussion room here before class. But we, of course, were also talking about Bilbo's apologies for telling the true story. So now we get into the summary bit, right? To some there, Bilbo's tale was wholly new, and they listened with amazement while the old hobbit, actually not at all displeased, recounted his adventure with Gollum at full length. He did not omit a single riddle. He would have given also an account of his party and disappearance from the Shire if he had been allowed, but Elrond raised his hand. "Well told, my friend," he said, "but that is enough at this time. For the moment it suffices to know that the ring passed to Frodo, your heir. Let him now speak." All right, so what do we notice here, right? To some there, Bilbo's tale was wholly new, and they listened with amazement, while the old hobbit, actually not at all displeased. The actually not at all displeased, of course, confirms fairly clearly that both, any sort of element of complaining in Bilbo's own tone, as well as the sort of teasing in Elrond's own reply to him, are clearly banter, right? Or clearly hobbitry, as we have noticed before. So we see him being not at all displeased. And then, of course, the narrator seems to expand on that just a little bit, right? Recounted his adventure with Gollum at full length. He did not omit a single riddle. That sentence, that very simple, straightforward sentence, right? Seems, well, kind of deadpan, if you see what I mean, right? He did not omit a single riddle. Bilbo, yes, that's not really necessary, right? I mean, we think about this, presumably the evidentiary value of Bilbo's story is just the fact that it's useful, presumably, to learn some about Gollum, right? Who he was and how he got there, maybe. But Bilbo can't really tell that, nor can you draw very firm conclusions from that just from listening to the riddle game. But yeah, Tony, it would take like an hour to tell the full story. You're absolutely right. Even assuming he gives a very cursory version of the entire rest of his adventure, right? If he tells the entire riddle game story, not omitting a single riddle, then yeah, there's that's going to take a while. So yeah. Nathan says the fact that Bilbo told the riddles is great. Imagining old elves listening to those riddles. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it does definitely take a while. He would have given also an account of his party and disappearance from the Shire if he had been allowed, but Elrond raised his hand. Now, why do you think? I mean, it may be enough. It may simply be that Elrond has stopped Bilbo from continuing to tell the full story of his party and disappearance because Bilbo is being self-indulgent, right? These are the parts of the story, the two parts of the story about his ring that are most important, that he is clearly, that he is prompting to tell, is that he's being prompted to tell, I should say, is how he got the ring and how he got rid of it, right? So he's telling those two things. He tells the first in great detail, and he's stopped from telling the second one. It is certainly possible, Tessa, that everybody's bored. It's also possible, Chris, that Elrond is also hungry and looking forward to lunch sooner rather than later. But I wonder. Here's why I ask that. Is there any chance that Elrond is wanting to? Okay, so of the two, for instance, here's what I'm trying to get at. The riddle game and the departure. Of the two, if I were trying to show someone, if I were trying to explain to a room of people like this, right? What is this ring about? How does this ring act, right? If I'm trying to show what this ring is and what it does, actually what happened to Bilbo at the end is, in my mind, 4 times more interesting and important than what happened to Bilbo at the beginning, right? There are some things that can be gleaned, of course, from it, especially if you can learn some stuff about Gollum and maybe draw some conclusions about how he got into the state that he was. But look, that's not obvious, right? So not obvious that Gandalf himself, Gandalf and Elrond themselves, with not only having heard the whole story, but having years and decades to think about it, didn't come to the right conclusion right away. And it was only when Gandalf finally found Gollum and interrogated him that he was able to put together the story. So it's not like from Bilbo's tale you can get the whole story of Gollum, and from the story of Gollum you can tell, okay, yeah, this is totally the Great Ring, right? But whereas the second story, the story of Bilbo's departure and what the strange fit that came over Bilbo, how hard it was for him to get rid of the ring. That would have taken less time to tell, to begin with. But secondly, in my mind, it seems a good deal more revealing, and I don't think that that's just me either, right? Gandalf himself admitted to Frodo back in chapter 2 chapter 2 of book 1, that it was that moment. It was Bilbo's departure that really tipped Gandalf off, right? And made him to suspect the true identity of the ring. He was operating under the premise that it was some other ring, right? Until that moment. It was when he saw what it did to Bilbo that he was like, whoa, dude, there's got to be some other explanation of this. And so therefore, again, I would say that it's, at the very least, it would seem to me that what Bilbo experienced when he gave the ring away is at least as valuable as evidence of the identity of this ring, at least as valuable as the riddle game itself, right? Now, I do agree, Fourth Dauntless, that seeing what happened to Gollum gives an idea of how thoroughly the ring might ruin someone, but we're not getting that, or rather, they're not getting that. We got that, right? Gandalf told Frodo that, and we heard Gandalf tell Frodo that, but the council isn't learning that, right? Not now, in any case. They're hearing it from Bilbo. Bilbo doesn't know it. I don't think that Bilbo knows the story, and we've not really been led to believe. I mean, there's nothing in this paragraph that leads us to believe that he is telling Gollum's whole backstory as learned by Gandalf, right? Not only because Bilbo would probably leave that to Gandalf, because it's not Bilbo's story, that's Gandalf's story, right? But what we're told is that he recounts his adventure with Gollum at full length. And again, I'm not saying that it's irrelevant or something. I'm just saying it is both at least as relevant, right? The story of his party and his appearance is at least as important as the other, and it's also a good deal shorter, unless he's going to tell the entire story of the entire party, right? I guess perhaps Elrond could be very easily excused from preventing an entire narration of the party and the guest list and and all that kind of thing. I don't know. Interesting, I wonder. Angrist says skipping the inheritance avoids potentially shaming Bilbo. It may be probative, but there are other proofs which are more conclusive than that story. Yes, I suppose. And it's true, Tony, that they're less interested in its power than its provenance. Presumably, I mean, they're certainly concerned about its provenance, right? But there are really two questions on the table, right? The two questions are, I'm going to need to flip to the end here. Let me go back to how Boromir said it, right? How do the wise know that this ring is his, and how has it passed down the years until it is brought hither by so strange a messenger? Those are the two questions, right? How do we know that this ring is the ring of power, in fact? And how has it passed down the years until it is brought hither by so strange a messenger? How do we know this is Sauron's ring, and how on earth did it get here? Why is there a halfling bringing it to Rivendell right now, right? Yes, obviously, Bilbo's story about how he found it in the mountains, very relevant to that second question, right? Some elements of that story, right? The riddle story might be, but I would say very indirectly evidentiary for the first question. How do the wise know that the ring is his? But again, that second one is even more. All I'm asking here, and Angrist, you're exactly right. Galdor is going to ask a very similar thing later on. All I'm asking here is it possible that there is another reason other than boredom, right? Other than Elrond's desire to keep Bilbo from nattering on all day long, right? Other than, Elrond kind of, in a sense, almost turning Bilbo's own words back at him, right? I mean, he doesn't really indulge in any overt hobbitry here. He could, right? I mean, Elrond could raise his hand and say, all right, who's thriving on speech alone now, Bilbo, right? I thought you wanted lunch, but he doesn't say that, right? It's very possible. It's very possible that, yes, Aristor doesn't need to hear about the Proudfoots. That is perfectly, it could just be that, but I'm wondering what, if there could be any other motivation, and if so, what it would be. Chris says that he's with the notion of sparing Bilbo from the shame of his parting with the ring. Perhaps, I don't know. I'm not sure I buy that one for two reasons. One, because the ring being what it is, I'm not sure that there is shame attached to it. I feel pretty confident that there's no shame attached to it. And I'm not even sure that Bilbo himself would feel shame for it. Maybe he would. But again, I'm thinking back to his flash of understanding during the at the Hall of Fire, right? Put it away. I understand now, right? And I'm thinking that perhaps I don't know. I'm thinking perhaps Bilbo wouldn't feel shame because he understands now, right? Yeah. Exactly. See, but even after I understand now, put it away, Chris, I think, I'm not sure he would feel shame. Maybe he would, but I don't know. Yeah. He does say, I'm sorry for everything. But see, Chris, I don't think it's his own actions that he's sorry about. I think he's sorry that Frodo came in for this, right, as he says, but I don't know. I'm not 100% convinced that I'm not sold on that. But what's more, I am even less sold on the idea that to spare Bilbo lest his feelings lest he experience some kind of chagrin that everyone would agree he really shouldn't, but lest he do that, we're gonna skip evidence. Like we're gonna not tell people about reasons to believe that this is the enemy's ring. Like I'm even less convinced of that, if you see what I mean. Yeah, I don't know. Right, Comic 99 is saying it's not necessarily his feelings, but his deeper mental health that I would have been worried about. I don't know. I mean, I've got to think, if you're worried about Bilbo's longer-term mental health, the greatest danger would be him sitting there or seeing the ring held up in front of him, right? That, clearly, again, if you're worried about Bilbo long-term, that's got to be way more dangerous than allowing him to tell a story which he was keen to tell. Let's not forget, like, Elrond has to cut him off. And if he hadn't cut him off, Bilbo would have told the whole thing, right? So again, I don't think that Bilbo seems to have reservations about it. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah. Janae says, maybe Elrond is just a fantastic mediator. Maybe he is, maybe this is Elrond just very skillfully running his meeting. Yeah, see, I don't know, Flamifer. I mean, again, Flamifer, I'm kind of building off your comment here. What he says, for the moment, it suffices to know that the ring passed to Frodo, your heir. Let him now speak. Really? That suffices? I mean, Bilbo's surrendering of the ring voluntarily is a huge deal. I mean, you could say like, well, maybe they're sparing his blushes right now. Maybe they don't want to tax his humility, right, by saying in front of this august crowd that, this hobbit here, Bilbo Baggins, has accomplished what Isildur himself did not accomplish, right? Has accomplished what no one else, as far as we know, in the history of Middle-earth has ever done, and that is yielding the Ring of Power to someone else of his own free will, right? That also would be a thing that you could say, but that's another thing that Elrond. So how Frodo was affected, the evidence of the desire of the ring on Bilbo, that's being skipped, right? The significance of Bilbo giving it up, right? Elrond is going to skate right over that too and just say it suffices to know that the ring passed to Frodo, your heir. Yeah. Well, it may be irrelevant to provenance, Matt, but it's not. But that's only half the question. Half the question is, how did Frodo get it? But the other half of the question is, how do we know this is the Ring of Power, right? So perhaps it's simply focus, right? Right, exactly, JJ, that they're not answering the other question just yet. Perhaps so. Perhaps so. In which case, it's inexcusable to allow the whole riddle game, right? And that went on for quite a long time, right, without being stopped. Yeah. Yeah, so Zephan, yes, at full length refers to Gollum and then skips straight to the party because he's laser focused, right? How I got the ring and how I gave it away. He knows that's his role, right? So he's being super disciplined, right, in only saying those two things. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, good. Dolores Stroke is saying, is it ever clear that Boromir knows the ring makes you disappear? Well, let's watch for evidence of that. Do we know that? Do we know that for certain? Lil Atomic on Twitch says, is imagining Bilbo pausing after each riddle to let everyone there puzzle it out for a bit. I like that idea. Yeah, I remember what he says, Chris. Well, let's not worry about what he says because that's still a while down the Boromir. I mean, that's still a while down the future. Yeah, JJ, it is public knowledge in the Greater Erebor region, right? What the ring does. Yeah, presumably adventure with Gollum at full length would include his putting on the ring and becoming invisible. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So that would include the escape from Gollum, and so that should include the invisibility there. Yeah. So I would think, presumably here, though again, this is another thing that to me makes this passage really interesting, right? That is, why is it that we're not, I mean, I know why we're not having the whole Hobbit retold to us again, right? But it's not just a question of the thing being summarized for us. Elrond also is skipping over things here, right? And I wonder, yeah, Nahor was just saying the same thing. Yeah. I don't know. I can see the reasons. I don't know, like I said, I'm not saying that like the joke at Bilbo's expense is enough. Like, that's totally enough, right? That would explain it sufficiently. My question, you'll remember, was, is it possible, right? Could there be any other reason? Is there another way to understand that? Just because it seems to me a little bit odd that, because we could have had this joke earlier on, right? That is to say, Elrond doesn't have to let Bilbo tell the whole riddle game story, right? He could have intervened earlier and said, even as soon as he starts telling the riddles, right? He's already told how he found the ring, right? He could have been like, skip a bit, brother, right? In the middle there, right? And like, skip ahead to, when Gollum charged after you and you escaped, right? So that he could illustrate that, like, when he put the ring on, it made him invisible or whatever, right? That's definitely, that would have been enough, right? But we don't have him interrupting there. Yes, and Nathan, you're right. Right before this, Elrond was joking about Bilbo casting the story into verse, right? But see, Rhiannon, that's just the thing. If he is interested in Bilbo showing Gollum mercy, why on earth would he not be interested in what happened when Bilbo gave the ring away? Which is at least as important, right? So it's I guess that's just, it's the problem that I'm having, is that this account doesn't satisfy either option, right? Either, because we've got the two questions: how do we know this is Sauron's ring, and if it is, how did it get here, right? The provenance, so the identity of the ring question, the provenance of the ring question, right? If we're going to say all that matters here is the provenance, that's the only reason Bilbo is testifying, is to the provenance of the ring. Well, this doesn't satisfy that, because he gives a whole bunch of information. If we're interested, Rhiannon, exactly as you suggest, in seeing Bilbo's mercy and trying to understand the effect of the ring on Gollum, any of those things, if any of that stuff is, if we are to take it that Bilbo's first story there is relevant, it's not relevant to the provenance story. But so if we're instead to say, well, we're interested in more than provenance, obviously, then why aren't we interested in more than provenance later on? So anyway, yeah. Let's see. Matt says, are we sure that Elrond knows the whole story of Bilbo's leaving? Probably. Gandalf has had several days to catch up with Elrond. So it's hard for me to imagine he wouldn't have told him the whole thing. And hang on a few days. I'm slipping a gear. I'm thinking about his conversation with Frodo. He's had decades to tell him that. Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking about his conversation with how the conversation with Frodo went right earlier on. Yeah. No, it's been quite some time. He's had plenty of time to tell Elrond, and I see no reason that he wouldn't have told him that. JJ says Bilbo has had years to tell Elrond. Also true. Hard to imagine that Elrond hasn't heard the story of the unexpected party, the long expected party before. Yeah. Forthought says this is also not a story that Bilbo would hesitate telling of his own volition. No, and it certainly doesn't seem like he's hesitating right now, right? So yeah, Mudmore says, and if you want to know more, buy my book. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. So Nathan is imagining that Bilbo had just begun to chant, and that's when Elrond said, so like he hasn't cast the riddle game into verse yet, but he has cast the long expected party story into verse. And so right when he's about to begin his his comical tale and rhyming couplets about the long-expected party. That's, in fact, when Elrond breaks in. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It just seems inconsistent. And like I said, it's an inconsistency which provides a joke. And that, maybe that's enough. That's enough on its own. But it's inconsistent. It just strikes me as inconsistent from Elrond's perspective. To allow the first, and to not to allow the first, and no singing, says evil Dr. Cannon. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Well, but Lincoln, that's exactly it. Lincoln says, I think Elrond felt it was crucial the details of the ring's finding be read into the congressional record. For some reason, he's less concerned that the details of the handoff be so known. Well, that's exactly my question. If there's a reason, I'd like to kind of think through what it could be, right? Yeah. Well, Rowan, I agree. That is one sort of outside of the frame of the narrative reason, right? Is that, of course, the first story, the Finding of the Ring story, is a story which many of us have probably read before. If we've read The Hobbit before, we've read The Lord of the Rings, but not necessarily all. Whereas much closer to 100% of the people who have gotten to chapter 2 of book 2 will have also read chapter 1 of book 1, right? So that story is within this book, and so needs even less recollection to us, right, than the earlier one. Possibly. But yeah, Lincoln, that's another good way to tell the, to frame the question, right? What specifically is the narrative that Elrond is trying to establish? Yes. And I would add, is there a way in which this particular imbalance, tell the first part but don't tell the second part, that enhances a particular narrative, a particular version of the narrative? Is there... Is anyone going to talk about the desire for the ring that grows in the hearts of others? Do you see what I mean? The effects of the ring on people. Does that... I'm not sure that comes up. Well, Gandalf knows about it, Arahad. I mean, he's seen it. He's figured it out. Bilbo knows about it, right? Yeah. Well, Fourth Dauntless, all we need is Gollum got the ring at the Gladden Fields, Bilbo got the ring from Gollum, he passed it along to Frodo. Yes, again, only if we're concerned about the provenance. But remember, there is no clear, unquestionable provenance, even if you're just thinking about provenance, between Isildur and Gollum, right? I mean, yeah, there's the coincidence of geography, and maybe that's enough to convince you. But if you were a hostile, if you were a hostile attorney, it wouldn't be enough, right? It's circumstantial at best to say that Gollum pulled, but keep in mind that element of the story, Gollum pulling it out of the river, has not been told. It's not included here, right? So you'd think if the story, so coming back to Lincoln's excellent framing of the question, if Elrond's goal here is to keep a laser focus on the provenance of the ring, how did it get from Sauron's hand to Frodo's hands, like to around Frodo's neck right now? How did that happen, step by step? He's starting in the middle, right? I mean, he would start he's told about Isildur having it and about Isildur being killed. Next, he would call on Gandalf to tell the Gollum story, right? And then he would call on Bilbo to say how, like, Gollum had clearly, talked about it as his ring, and so we can feel very confident that this is indeed the ring that Gollum took out of the river, and all of the reasons that they already have to believe that the ring that was taken out of the river by Diagal was in fact Sauron's ring, right? So I don't think that that fits the narrative, is what I'm saying. Or if that is his focus, he's doing it badly. Again, he's starting in the middle. But if he's trying to do the other, he's also doing it badly. That is, if he's trying to give evidence, to allow evidence to be brought forward that this is indeed Sauron's ring, he's not doing a great job there either, right? He does, yes, talk about Gandalf going last because it's the place of honor. Yes. Maybe it's Bilbo's fault. Bilbo did interrupt, after all, right? Elrond called on Bilbo only after Bilbo interrupted, asking about lunch, right? So, yeah. Well, no, Tony, I am counting the story of Isildur and the ring before, but he's skipping the middle bit, right? What you could say is the crucial middle bit, right? I mean, think of the story. Imagine yourself, well, Boromir is sort of tricky, right? Imagine you're Legolas, right? Legolas is outside all of this, right? Legolas will probably have known almost none of this. He will have known Bilbo, right? He probably would have met Bilbo. This being, of course, one thing that Peter Jackson certainly got correct is that obviously Legolas would have been there in the events of The Hobbit, right? The only reason he wasn't in the book is that he hadn't been invented yet, and that is arguably not Legolas's fault. But anyway, so imagine you're Legolas, right? And you are hearing this story for the first time. He's heard that Isildur took the ring from Sauron's hand. He presumably had never heard that before, right? And that Isildur was slain by orcs and it was lost, right? Tessa says, arguably. Tessa, what I have always said, and I stand by this, if Legolas wasn't there, there has to be a reason, right? If there weren't a reason, he would be there. Maybe there was a reason, but you'd have to invent a reason to make Legolas not there, if he exists, right? Anyway, never mind. Okay. So, imagining you're Legolas, right? You've learned that Isildur took the ring from Sauron and that he then died at the Gladden Fields. What's the next thing you learn about the ring? Right then, Boromir very sensibly says, how do we know that this ring that Frodo just held up is the enemy's ring, and how on earth did he get it, right? Two very sensible questions, but again, you're Legolas and you're like, yeah, I'm pretty curious about that too. And then Elrond calls on Bilbo, and Bilbo speaks up and says, I was in the mountains one day, the Misty Mountains, not too far, but not too very close either to the Gladden Fields, and I found this random ring lying randomly about in a tunnel in the mountains, right? But it turned out it belonged to this Gollum creature. We told some riddles. He tried to kill me. I escaped, right? I handed off the ring to Frodo. What does that prove? Are you convinced? What does this prove, right? The middle is still completely missing, right? The middle of that story is still not there. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let me go back again. Back one more here. Right. No, it's the same one. Okay. He asks his question. Elrond says, that shall be told. Bilbo says, but not yet, I beg. And Elrond says, I had not named you, but I do so now. Come, tell us your tale. Right. So maybe Elrond is just rolling with it, right? Yeah. We are kind of, I mean, it is kind of working, but it's not even really working backwards consistently, fourth knowledge, or else we'd start with Frodo, right? Okay, Frodo, you just brought the ring. Let's backtrack and figure out where you got it. Oh, you inherited it from Bilbo. All right, Bilbo, now's the time, right? So, arguably, Bilbo, either way, in neither case should Bilbo have been the first one to talk. In which case, again, perhaps it simply was the mere fact that he interrupted. And then Elrond rolled with it, right? Now, you're right, Angerus, that this is the information, the proof as it was developed, right? It's chronological from the research perspective, not from the rings perspective. That is that gap that I'm identifying as the major gap, right, between the river and the mountain, right? Was the last part of the story to be filled in, right? That is true, but I have a hard time believing that that's being carefully built up in exactly that way, right? Yeah, Kit thinks that well, Valamoinen says Elrond was too polite to tell Bilbo to shut it, right? And Kit suggests that Elrond has just ripped up his agenda and tossed it up in the air at this point. That seems to me very, very possible. Very possible. There is a lot of red pen on the agenda, at the very least. Yeah, no question. Let's come back to this when Gandalf comes in, right? Let's yeah, JJ says, great, we'll have to move the second icebreaker to after lunch. Yeah, exactly. Right, Arjun points out that Elrond has a long perspective on these sort of things. He can roll with this narrative and presumably expects other people to roll with it too, right? But yeah, I think that we will see. I'm coming around to Angrist, was that you? Yes. I'm coming around to Angrist's point of view, which Matt was just supporting. Basically, to say, okay, we all agree on what happened with Isildur, right? We established that Isildur took the ring, right? Elrond has testified to that as an eyewitness, right? Isildur took the ring, and then it did not come down to his heirs. Right, we have seen the things that have come down to his heirs. Ring of Power wasn't among them, right? So okay, so we've established that first bit, and now, as Matt says, here is the first-person account of the ring before us, and then we're going to leave it to Gandalf to tie the two of them together. Yeah, even if that weren't his plan all along, I could see why he would sort of roll with it, right? Yeah, and that's another interesting way of thinking about it, JJ, that Elrond is basically starting with all the provable eyewitness accounts, right? The Gandalf's conclusions, I mean, even Gollum's testimony is a little iffy, right? I mean, Gandalf freely admits that he is speculating based on Gollum's account, right? He does not have direct testimony about what happened with the ring. Gollum's a liar, right? And continued to lie consistently and throughout. So yeah, facts before speculation. As solid as the speculation might be, first present the facts first. And that's why Elrond says, okay, we left the story with Isildur, right? Let's pick it up where it did pick up. So I was skeptical at first, Angus, but I'm coming around to this idea. I'm coming around to this idea. Maybe it is the best way to present it. To give the two ends and then hand the floor to Gandalf and allow him to connect those two dots, to explain the middle and how it works. Exactly, Nathan. It would be a we know this, we know that, therefore this must be true kind of argument. Yeah, exactly. That still doesn't explain to me why he doesn't want Bilbo to tell the story of how he gave it up, but it's interesting. And like I said, I'm willing to kind of hang on to that a little bit to sort of set that aside. I still don't feel like I've got a good frame for that. Like I have a frame in which that fits, but that's okay. We'll kind of come back to it. I think when we get to Gandalf here. Yeah, perhaps. Arana says that the order helps prevent the audience leaping ahead of the narrative. Maybe so. Maybe so. Dolor Stroke says they let Gandalf really ramble later. Strange that they cut Bilbo off. Well, Dolor Stroke, that's exactly why I don't question this passage exactly. But why I'm a little dubious, right? I mean, again, it's funny that he cuts Bilbo off and doesn't want to let Bilbo natter on, but at the same time, like, it's not like efficiency has been the hallmark of this council so far, right? I mean, like, why start now, really? Anyway, okay, but let's keep going. He says, to Frodo, your heir, let him now speak. That's very definitive, right? Let Frodo now speak. Well, mealtime might be a factor, but apart from Bilbo, no one's going to even bring it up. And we've got a lot to go, right? Somebody tell me, what percentage of the way through the Council of Elrond are we right now? Those of you who have it, like, in iBooks or something will be able to tell me pretty quickly, right? What percentage of the chapter are we through right now? I didn't think to check that. 31%. Okay, yeah, thanks, Arnas. Very good. 31%. So again, it's not like lunch is on the horizon, right? That's clearly not the biggest concern here. So yeah, I think they're going to end up working through lunch. I do think so. Right. And Rowan, you're absolutely right. There was a whole big chunk that was skipped at the beginning, right? So yeah, there's a great deal of stuff. Okay. Anyway, let's let Frodo now speak. Then, less willingly than Bilbo, Frodo told of all his dealings with the ring from the day that it passed into his keeping. That's a lot! All of his dealings with the ring from the day that it passed into his keeping? Every step of his journey from Hobbiton to the ford of Bruinen was questioned and considered, and everything that he could recall concerning the Black Riders was examined. At last he sat down again. Not bad, Bilbo said to him. You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it all again together sometime, if I am to write it up. Now, let me do that sentence again. I'm trying to figure out how to emphasize that. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it all again together sometime, if I am to write it up. There are whole chapters of stuff before you ever got here. Yes, it made quite a long tale, answered Frodo, but the story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially from Gandalf. Okay. All right, good. So, what do you think? Good. Both Argent and Zephin want to know who was doing the questioning. Great question. No idea. In fact, you will notice how emphatic this paragraph is about not answering that question. Do you see how emphatic it is about that? How do we know that this paragraph is emphatic about not telling us who answered the questions, right? Or who asked the questions? Frodo's answering them, right? Exactly, Tessa. And fourth knowledge, the passive voice. Yes, that's it, right? Every step of the journey was questioned and considered, and everything he could recall was examined, right? All of it is passive voice, right? We are told nothing at all about who asked those questions. Yeah, having established we certainly know nothing about that, I am now going to speculate. And here's the one piece of speculation that I feel ready to say. Two things I feel ready to say. First, I think not Elrond. I think if Elrond were the only one, if Elrond were his primary interlocutor, if this were just Elrond cross-questioning Frodo, it would have said that, right? I think that the passive voice, the use of the passive voice here indicates that the questioning was general, that the room is questioning him. Questions are popping up from all over the place, and he's answering lots of people's questions, right? If it were just Elrond prompting him with questions or probing his account with questions, I would think the narrator would have said that rather than leaving it in the passive voice. I also rather suspect that it was that Boromir probably did not say very much, because given the very active role that Boromir has had and the interest in which the narrator has shown in Boromir and Boromir's reactions to things, I would think that might have been mentioned too. Yeah. Evil Dr. Cannon says it sounds like a thesis defense. Yeah, exactly. You stand in front of the room and they all ask you questions. Anyway, obviously I can't prove that either of those things, either that Elrond was not the primary questioner or that Boromir didn't ask questions. Those just seem to me two things that would very likely have been mentioned, right? Okay, so I go back to that first sentence that I paused on while I was reading it, right? Frodo told all of his dealings with the ring from the day that it passed into his keeping, right? Now, granted, there's not a lot to say. That wouldn't be a very exciting story. Like the first 17 years of his relationship with the ring are not super exciting. Does this mean that he did tell stories about it? Did he recall that time that he, I don't know. I mean, other thoughts about it? How much did he tell of his conversation with Gandalf, you know? I'm not really sure exactly, Mad Violinist. Did he use it to avoid unpleasant relatives and confess that? But even if we pass that over, even if that sentence means nothing other than, yeah, I had the ring, I used to keep it in my pocket, I kept it in my pocket all the time, I kept it locked up, whatever. Like, basically, I can prove that this is definitely the ring. Nobody swapped out this ring, right? This is definitely the ring that Uncle Bilbo gave to me. Now, Fourth Dauntless, you're absolutely right. I'm skipping over that opening clause, right? Less willingly than Bilbo. Why is he less willing? Is it just a personality thing? Is it a familiarity with audience thing? That is, Bilbo has met most of these people before and feels a lot more comfortable. I mean, he performs in the Hall of Fire sometimes, right? So he would not just be in awe of the room necessarily, right? Privacy concerns, says Aranas. Yeah, very, very likely. Very likely. Tarloniel does point out that Frodo's story is both more recent and more unpleasant, right? So he might not necessarily want to relive it, really. Matt points out that he also might be a little gun-shy about audiences since the incident at the Prancing Pony, right? Maybe. Perhaps so. Yeah. But, yeah, Mad Violinist was saying it could be the difference between Bilbo's positive adventures and Frodo's terror-haunted flight to the Ford. Yes. But right, Tony's asking, and Fourth Dauntless was asking in his original question, could the influence of the ring be involved here at all? I don't see here on this whole passage, this paragraph or the next two paragraphs, I don't see any of the markers that would seem to indicate ring activity clearly. No sudden feelings or convictions that he has, no thoughts about the ring, right? No idle, thinking about the ring or imagining putting it on and escaping from the silly situation or anything like that, right? Those are the kinds of things that are, are sort of smoking gun evidence of some kind of activity of the ring directly. I don't see anything here. Now, that doesn't prove that that it's not happening, but I don't see anything which seems to point directly to that. And that's interesting, Tony. Tony's wondering if maybe Frodo is thinking that he is working up to a moment where he has to give up the ring. We talked about that before, right? That almost certainly when Frodo walked into the room, he thought that was the purpose of this. This is the end of his quest, right? His quest was to get the ring to Rivendell and surrender it to the wise. Here they are, right? All the wise present are here in the room, right? This council is where that's supposed to happen, right? Exactly, Belongsman. We saw him wanting to give it to Aragorn before. And so, Tony, exactly, if that's true, if he's thinking about that, the culmination of his testimony here could well be him giving up the ring, right? Yeah. It is also, and I forget which one of you said this, Matt maybe, was saying that it is interesting that Frodo's story holds them spellbound, where Bilbo's, or rather, because you kind of do it the other way around, right? Bilbo, that was what you were saying, Matt, that Bilbo's story was holding them spellbound. Nobody interrupted Bilbo, right? Whereas as soon as Frodo starts talking, he's getting cross-questioned from everywhere, right? They've got to prompt him with questions in order to get all the information that they want and that they need. Right. Poor Thoughtless says no one was actually interested in Bilbo's riddles. They were all busy on their phones during that time. So it was just because nobody was paying attention that nobody interrupted him. Also possible. Certainly recency has a lot to do with their particular interest in this thing, right? There's only so much point in cross-questioning Bilbo about details of his encounter with Gollum, right? Whereas here, there's a lot that needs to be, as we are about to transition away from reporting of fact and on to speculation about things, right? And drawing of conclusions from facts, they are wanting to get as much data out of Frodo as possible, as no doubt most of them in the room are thinking that there's a lot in his story that they may well understand better than Frodo does. Even, I mean, he was there, he saw what happened, but that doesn't mean he knows why, right? What were the ringwraiths doing? Why did the ringwraiths act the way that they did? What was up with the sniffing, right? Frodo didn't even think to ask Gildor about the sniffing, right? Pippin was pretty sure it was important, but Frodo didn't ask about it, right? What does it tell them, right? The more details he can give, the better conclusions they can draw. It is also possible that Bilbo is just a better storyteller than Frodo, though that's a kind of ironic thing to say in the midst of a story which is reputedly told by Frodo, chiefly, right? But, okay. I think I would go with a combination of things here. One reason, surely, why Bilbo or Frodo is less willing than Bilbo is that this is, I mean, it's not fun for him, right? And so this is not a fun. His is not a fun story to tell. Bilbo's might have been gruesome and palpitating at the time, but it was a long time ago now, right? And has long since become simply a fun story for him to tell. Frodo's recent encounter with the ringwraiths and his stabbing and the effects of the stabbing is not so much. And I wonder, Cosmic, I wonder if Frodo might be starting to sense that his story isn't over yet. Maybe. Maybe he feels that he's coming up on the giving away of the ring. Maybe he feels the opposite, Cosmic, as you're suggesting, right? Maybe he feels there's still more to be done now, and that makes him uneasy, right? And certainly, Amy, you're right that Frodo's story does contain the most recent information about the ring. So if we're wanting to establish all the facts, they would want to... those facts are clearly much more immediately relevant. Yeah. Interesting, Zephin. Thank you for reminding me of that. That is excellent, and I it's easy to get muddled on these things, and I don't usually remember it clearly. But Zephin is pointing out that in the original draft of the Council of Elrond, the sequence was different. In the original draft, when he first told the story went, Bilbo gave his account, then Gandalf told his story, then Frodo went. So Tolkien did, in fact, shift up the order deliberately. It's not just kind of how it naturally... He made a distinct choice in order to put things that way. Now, the original order doesn't solve my other problems, right? It's still not putting the middle in the middle. It's still out of sequence, but it's still out of sequence. But it's a little bit less, I don't know what, sort of urgently out of sequence, right? You go to Bilbo, and then you're like, okay, but before we move on from Bilbo, let's pause and go back and explain the gap in between. Yeah. Arna says it might help explain Bilbo getting cut off. What if Gandalf did it originally? Yeah, because he would cut Bilbo off more mercilessly, perhaps. But I do agree, Valori, that there is an organic logic to it, especially the way that it's presented now, the published version, the revised version. Yeah. But yeah, just germane to what we were just saying about Frodo there, it is true that Frodo telling him his story at the end does lead up more directly to Frodo volunteering to take it and to keep it. Yeah. Right. Cecilia is thinking that perhaps some of the elves might have been some of the questions they might have wanted to establish if make sure that they'd be checking in to make sure that Gildor sufficiently said both no and yes, right? Were his answers sufficiently ambivalent, right? Or else he might have been censured by the elf community. So yeah, I'm sure they did need to establish that. Yeah. Okay. Every step of his... Now, I just want to go through just in that first paragraph and just notice again the specific things that are being mentioned. Every step of his journey and everything that he could recall concerning the Black Riders. So where he traveled and what happened to him, and especially everything that he can say about the Black Riders. Yeah, exactly, Jason. And exactly how many dishes did you leave for Lobelia in Bag End? Yeah, we've got to sort that out. Yeah. Bilbo's comment to him. Why does he do that? Not bad. You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it all again together sometime. Why does Bilbo offer him a literary critique? Primarily, right? Yeah, Tony, I think he's trying to lighten the mood too. I think that there is... I mean, it is true that Bilbo does love storytelling, and it's sort of charmingly within Bilbo's idiom, right? To think about it that way. But this seems to me, look, I don't care how into storytelling you are. If you're in this situation, this isn't about storytelling, right? This is about not only world-shaking events here, but, serious traumatic, like including physical and psychological trauma, spiritual trauma, right, to Frodo himself. Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking, Karita, that Frodo is reliving trauma and Bilbo is pulling him out, right? That is to say, Bilbo knows full well that this was not, Frodo's entry into the rhetoric competition, right? What happens, right? By saying, not bad. You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. That's dispassionate, right? That's objective. He is the immediate thing that he does is invite Frodo, to reflect on the story that he's just told objectively as a story, right? Not as those kind of immediately lived events, right? Exactly, Karita. If you can think of it more like a future memoir and less like living it all over again, it will really help. And Musical, you're right that he's inviting him to have more confidence as well. He does praise him, right? And not just with the slightly faint praise, right, of not bad, but also throwing the blame on others, right? You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. You'd have done even better, right? But again, I think to me that, the main thing is that he is offering the very first commentary, sort of personal commentary that Frodo gets on it, is one that invites him, Frodo, to achieve a kind of emotional distance from the events, right? And that simply does seem to me kind on Bilbo's part, right? Like everyone else is dragging detail after detail out of. I mean, he is being forced to relive this in every possible detail that he can muster, right? And Bilbo is the first one to kind of throw him a bone here, right? Help him to kind of break out of that mode, right? Karita says Bilbo is better at managing pretty delicate psychological situations than I would have expected. Yeah. Between this and what we saw in the Hall of Fire, I think it's pretty perceptive. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's interesting. Tony says it seems like something that he might have said in Bag End, so there's comfort and familiarity. Yeah, perhaps so. Putting this on a friendly and familiar basis, right? Like critiquing somebody's storytelling. But Zephan, I do agree with you that it is definitely worth noticing that although he might be talking this way to try to sort of ease Frodo's feelings, right? To help Frodo kind of process and kind of emotionally back up from what he's just been describing. It is also delightful that Bilbo is clearly presuming that he's going to write this up, right? That writing an account of this is definitely going to be his job, right? We shall have to go over it all again together sometime if I'm to write it up, right? Interesting. Nathan is saying that it does also seem to be that Bilbo is becoming more and more fixated on storytelling. That he brings it up at almost every conversation before this. I think it has more clearly become his primary interest, right? Storytelling. Right, Tony and Aranas both thinking about his interest in leaving a legacy. Yes, perhaps. It does come up Angrist in The Hobbit, but in The Hobbit he's mostly thinking about his tea kettle, right, more than anything else, or about his pipe. And bacon, absolutely. Eggs and bacon come up with some frequency as well. There are whole chapters of stuff before you ever got here. Whole chapters of stuff is a fascinating way to describe it. Though again, slighting in a kind of comforting way, right? In its way. And it is, of course, all of book one. I mean, it is, as I forget who is describing Bilbo as kind of poking at the fourth wall here. Yeah, exactly. Yes. We shall have to go over it all again together sometime. That's the phrase I kept struggling with figuring out how to say. Oops. Sorry. I was suspecting that was about to happen. That is how to emphasize it, because those three words, all again together. And I wasn't sure where to lay the stress. I feel like it should be a stress on one of them, or at least one, but I wasn't sure which. We shall have to go over it all again together, or all again or together. We shall have to go over it all again together. We shall have to go over it all again together. We shall have to go over it all again together. Or we shall have to go through it all again together. I think together. I think the stress, yeah, it's got to be the third one. But we shall have to go over it all again together sometime. Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think that's right. In which case, Karita, I'm thinking back to your point now, right? If what he was wanting to do was to enable an immediate sort of relief to Frodo, right? Let's stop reliving these things and let's think about it from a literary distance, right? He is nevertheless relentless in his desire actually to write a book about it, which is going to involve going back over it all again, right? But they're going to go through it all again together, right? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Tilian says that he says sometime, right? We shall have to go over it all again together sometime, if I am to write it up. Not necessarily not later, right? Not soon. Sometime does seem less immediate, Arnas. Like, don't worry, we can let it sit for a little bit, right? Yeah, Tilian says it seems like Bilbo isn't expecting it to be soon, and I don't get why. Is it perhaps he thinks, right? Is it because he's putting it off until after the now wholly indeterminate lunch? Yeah. He's afraid that Frodo is going to get stuck with the rest of the quest. Yeah. Bilbo is going to say afterwards, at the beginning of the next chapter, Bilbo is going to say that he was afraid that this is what was going to happen, right? That Frodo would get stuck with it. This would be evidence to support that, perhaps, Tilian, if we believe that that's what he was really thinking at the time, right? Yeah. And I know Bilbo's going to offer to go himself. That I want to wait to look at more. Because that I think is complicated. Very complicated. So Tilian, what I'm trying to think is, by his saying sometime, it's not definite, right? I mean, sometime could be later that night. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 2 years, right? Is there reason to think that he is anticipating one way or another, one of us is going to end up going off on this journey? So, after the whole quest, after the inevitable quest is done, then we can go over it. Is that what sometime means in Bilbo's mind? I don't know, because if it is, Tony, that's exactly what I was building towards. Is this a question of giving hope for the future, right? No rush, No rush, right? We'll do it when you get back. No big deal, right? Yeah, there's certainly not a sense of urgency. Praise, I can certainly agree with that, right? Whatever else we say, that is certainly true here, which would certainly be awkward, right? Well, we better do it before you go, because I mean, yikes, right? That would be the opposite of this here. And also perhaps, maybe he's building on the possibility that Frodo might not be ready or available to talk for a while, for one reason or another. Perhaps. It's possible. Yes, it made quite a long tale, answered Frodo, but the story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. What does Frodo want to know? Frodo is saying he wants to know where the heck Gandalf was and why he didn't come back, right? That's clearly because Gandalf wouldn't tell him, right? He says, I was held captive, he tells him, right? That's all he would say before. He didn't say by whom, and he didn't say why and what happened. But that it should be told, right? And this is, Nathan, you're absolutely right. That's what I was just about to say. This is clearly the Gandalf-related mystery that the reader is going to be most curious about too, that we also have been wondering about for longest. But in the economy of the meeting, it's not the most important thing. In fact, it turns out to be very germane, right, because of Saruman and the betrayal of Saruman, and that's a big deal. But the question of Gandalf's contribution to filling in the gap between the Gladden Fields and the Misty Mountains, as far as the provenance of the ring is concerned, would seem to be a very much more significant element of Gandalf's testimony than where have you been, Gandalf? And Jennifer, I agree with you that he definitely wants to hear and know about the rest of the story, but it doesn't really look like he has any desire to be a part of it. Yeah, I don't see any clear evidence of that, certainly. You're right, Cecilia, to remind us that this conversation between Bilbo and Frodo is happening aside, right? This is not like everyone in the room isn't listening to them. So Frodo has just sat down, and when Frodo sits down, presumably there's a bunch of general conversation in the room, right? As people are talking with their neighbors over what they've just been hearing, and what ideas they have or further questions they might have. And during that time, Bilbo and Frodo are chatting with each other here, right? So, that I think is important to remember, that neither one of them is addressing the room, right? When, and that's, by the way, I dislike the way that Robert Inglis reads that paragraph. He puts an edge into Bilbo's first sentence. Not bad. You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting, right? He says that as if it's meant to be overheard by everybody else around them, right? But I don't think that that's how it's read. I don't think it's how it should be read. I don't think that's how it's said by Bilbo, because I think it's pretty clear that the whole room isn't listening to Frodo and Bilbo talk to each other, really. Interesting. So Chris was suggesting, said that when my aunt read this to me, the last part of Frodo's speech here was emphasized in the "I don't really care if you overhear me" sort of way. So you think that Frodo might be speaking up a little bit. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. Right? He's not like raising his hand and being like, "Yo, people," right? I want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. But that he's not just whispering that to Bilbo. Exactly. Yeah, and we know, of course, someone is about to overhear them. So, but Galdor is an elf, has good ears, and is sitting right nearby, presumably. So that doesn't prove that Frodo is shouting that necessarily. But yeah, if we peek at the next passage, Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. "You speak for me also," he cried, and turning to Elrond, he said, right? Fourth Dauntless says, do we have text evidence that elves have good ears? Am I just merely making an extrapolation there? I think maybe I am. Ah, the dwarf breathes so loud we could shoot him in the dark, says Tessa. Yeah. Yeah, that would be, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so of course it's not said to the dwarf in the book, right? It's said to the hobbits. But yeah. The business about their breathing. Yeah. Yeah, that's the only one that comes immediately to mind of acuity of ears, of hearing to the elves. No, it doesn't imply that all elves, that the elves have good, well, okay, yeah. I don't think it just implies the hobbits breathe loudly. I think Sam kind of takes it that way, but yeah. Good. Oh, Chris, thank you for that. Very good. Frodo tells Sam that Gollum can hear as keen as elves. Yeah. Elves are used as a standard for keenness of hearing, specifically by Frodo. And I've got to think that when he says that, and that's in the Emyn Muil, of course, at the beginning of Book 4. So I have to imagine that Frodo is basing that on that encounter with Haldir at the borders of Lorien. Yep. Anyway. Yeah, they can hear the talk of the land, but that's not about acuity of hearing. Howsoever sharp your ears were, I doubt that you would hear the stones of the land speaking and be able to interpret their speech, right? That's not about sharpness of ears. That's about, like, spiritual discernment and attunement, right? Yeah. So I don't think that's about that. Yeah. Okay, let's see. And again, it's not about the keenness of Galadriel's ears that enables her to hear their thoughts, certainly. We absolutely get specifics about the sharpness of Legolas's vision. That by itself, of course, doesn't prove that all elves see like Legolas does. Legolas, I feel confident in saying that Legolas's vision is unusual, even for elves. Yes, you have the fair eyes of your kindred, Gandalf says to Legolas. But I wonder if Legolas's ability to tell a sparrow from a finch a league off is something that all elves share. I am thinking that, of course, what I'm primarily thinking of there is Legolas Greenleaf is an old character. Legolas Greenleaf is ultimately recycled from Tolkien's earlier mythology. The original Legolas Greenleaf was an elf of Gondolin from the Book of Lost Tales version of the Fall of Gondolin, and what he was primarily famous for was his incredibly sharp eyes and vision. So the very unusually sharp eyes of Legolas Greenleaf are at least recalled in Legolas of the Nine Walkers. That doesn't by itself prove that Legolas's eyes are sharper than other elves, but certainly to me opens the possibility. Anyway, okay. But whether or not he has really, again, the sharpness of his ears don't necessarily need to be in question here. I doubt that Frodo and Bilbo are like attempting to make sure nobody else hears them. Whether or not, Chris, what Frodo says, he says out loud, hoping to be overheard. Whether or not that's true, they're speaking no secrets, right? There's no reason that anything that they have said couldn't necessarily be interrupted. Yeah, it's private, not secret. Exactly. Or yeah, not interrupted, but overheard, I meant. And again, I'm also presuming that they're not the only ones in the room talking, right? Galdor is calling people to attention, right? Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. "You speak for me also," he cried. Galdor, from that moment, is wanting to be heard, right? He's crying that. He shouts out loud. It is Galdor who calls them back to attention, right? By crying out loud, "You speak for me also." And he turns to Elrond and delivers his speech, right? Yes, presumably crying, meaning shouting, not weeping. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. His speech. "The wise may have good reason to believe that the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely though that may seem to those who know less. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would ask this also. What of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel, if he knows the things that we have heard?" Okay. Great questions from Galdor. Notice the first thing that we have to notice is that Boromir's questions, which again, sometimes people take to be aggressive on his part, right? Challenging, perhaps, are echoed by Galdor of the Havens, who's got to be as close to a neutral party in all things Boromir related as anybody else could be, right? "The wise may have good reason to believe that the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely though that may seem to those who know less," right? But may we not hear the proofs? Galdor points out, it has not been proven that Frodo's ring is indeed the great ring of long debate. It is a slightly more respectful version of Boromir's question. Certainly more respectful in the sense that he is going out of his way to be polite, right? Yes. Unlikely though that may seem to those who know less. Yeah, Bricktails, of course, this is a really interesting piece of data, this sentence, in trying to answer the question, who exactly are the wise, right? Galdor has ruled himself out. Galdor clearly does not include himself. I think that the concept of who is the wise gets like smaller and smaller as time goes on. Until in the end, I think the wise kind of seems to mean Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond, honestly. Like the three of them sitting there communing with each other telepathically in Dunland, right? Yeah, that seems to pretty much be the wise. Tessa, I mean, Círdan probably gets like an honorary membership, right? I mean, even if he's not the wise, he's certainly one of the old, so that almost counts. But anyway, yeah. Right. Mike wants Celeborn to be included. I get it. Yeah. I just wanted to share with you. We were talking about my Celeborn pinata and how guilty I feel about that. Intermittently, rarely enough to keep me from making jokes at Celeborn's expense, but still, there it is. Enough to make me feel bad about it afterwards. And Arthur Harrow, after Mythgard Academy last week, was pointing out in Celeborn's, and I had never thought about this before. He was pointing out how you may remember that Celeborn makes a defense of old wives' tales. Right, and that there may be much wisdom retained by old wives. And Arthur was pointing out that was quite a tactful speech of him to make, given that he is standing right next to arguably the oldest wife in Middle-earth at the time. So it's very sensible. But anyway, okay, yeah, exactly, Bruce. He has an extremely old wife. But anyway, okay. But we are not going to resolve who is the wise right now. Just to note that this is an interesting, like Galdor votes himself off that particular island, right? And that's interesting because certainly if we had said that the wise, like who in this room would have been counted among the wise, we might have guessed Galdor from the Havens, right? But he obviously does not think so. Yeah. Lilatomic thinks that Círdan would be wise emeritus, basically. Yeah, he's no longer full member of the wise. Yeah, I agree. But anyway, okay. My first question, though, before we get back to the wise sentence. Why does he shout out, "You speak for me also"? "You speak for me also," he cried. And turning to Elrond, he said. So, Chris, whether or not Frodo said that in a voice that was intended to carry to many in the room, right? Whether this was Frodo's kind of gentle, not putting himself forward way, right, of asking for an explanation, right? Suggesting a new... basically, he's like, since Elrond has so little control over this meeting, and we all now are pretty sure that Elrond, if he ever did have an agenda, no longer has one, right? So I'm going to throw out the next topic of discussion here, since Elrond seems to pretty much roll with anybody who speaks up, right? So I'm going to speak up, putting in a little request to learn where the heck Gandalf has been and why he didn't show up for my birthday party, since apparently we're taking requests now, right? Exactly, Chris. We're at the new business section of the agenda, so Frodo can kind of bring it up. Anyway, okay. So Galdor, hearing him say, at the very least, Galdor has heard this. It doesn't seem to me like something Frodo would do to sort of shout that, There's a great deal that I would like to know, especially from Gandalf, right? Again, I don't think he's hiding it, but I don't think he's shouting it, but Galdor is, right? And "You speak for me also," he says. Now, as several of you are pointing out, he's just affirmed Frodo's comment, which, remember, was, "I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf." Galdor says, "Me too. Yeah, I'm with you, Frodo. I also want to learn a great deal, especially about Gandalf." And then he turns and says, can we hear the proofs that this is in fact Sauron's ring? And what of Saruman? He proceeds to not mention Gandalf at all, right? Yeah, so having just said, you speak for me, Frodo, except for the part about what you said, right? But in every other way, you speak for me, Frodo. That's kind of interesting. It's like he takes half of the thing, like, I still want to know a good deal. And Galdor's like, hey, I also want to know a good deal. Here's me, not one of the wise. Here's me knowing still not very many things about much, right? And I would like to know more about more things, right? So in that we agree. Again, I can take it or leave it, right, about Gandalf, whatever. Like that bit, I'm not so worried about. Yeah, Villar is saying it implies he wants to know why Gandalf is there instead of a useful wizard, right? Yeah. Why are we, hang on, is there a reason that we've got the second string over here, right? I mean, like, seriously, why do we have the auxiliary backup wizard when, like, we should have the main wizard, right? After all, like, seriously. What of Saruman? I mean, we're having a whole discussion here about the Ring of Power. And that's Saruman's specialty, right? I mean, it's like if we're going to have a discussion about the literary merits of Beowulf, we should have, like, why is the medievalist not even here, right, for this discussion? Like, I mean, come on, people. Yeah. Enoch Arden says, is Radagast a powerful wizard or is he more like you? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Chris is imagining the George R.R. Martin version of this, in which Galdor is part of a secret cabal of Haven's elves who are resentful that Círdan gave the ring to Gandalf. Yeah, yeah. Hey, unlike what could be more likely? So Belongspine, you're thinking that, like, therefore he's sort of putting the wise in air quotes here, right? The wise may have good reason to believe, right? No, I mean, he wouldn't say that about Elrond, obviously, but okay. The fact that he doesn't mention Gandalf makes his segue to me the more strange, right? Like, you speak for me also, not just as a conversational gambit with Frodo, right? But as a public segue. By shouting, you speak for me also, he's drawing attention either to what Frodo just said or to, he's drawing attention either to what Frodo just said or to the fact that Frodo was just saying something. Again, I'm not sure that the whole room just heard what he said. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, Frumius Boojum. That's what I'm wondering. Like, I mean, there's almost an element of, like, drawing attention to them whispering in the back of the class. I'm not saying that he's doing it spitefully, or that they should be embarrassed about it or anything. It's just odd. Fourth Dauntless says, this only works as a segue if you know that Gandalf has the answers to these questions. I want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. Me too. Let's present the proofs of the ring, that this is Sauron's ring. You know, like, let's let Gandalf talk already. And what of Saruman? What is his counsel? if he knows that Gandalf is going to have exactly Bricktails, and someone was asking that before, basically if Galdor is Gandalf's plant, right? Yeah, Kimber saying that he thinks that Galdor assumes that Gandalf is entwined with these topics, right? That in saying these things, he is providing a slightly more detailed segue into Gandalf than Frodo's much more general, I want to know a good deal more, especially about Gandalf, right? Yeah. Valori, it could well be that he thinks Gandalf is going to deliver a message from Saruman. Oh man, I'm being bad about this evening. Yeah, yes, he could very well believe or suspect that. Yeah. It makes perfect sense, Lincoln, for him to be saying, essentially, you went to consult with Saruman recently, didn't you, Gandalf? What does he say? And for that matter, why isn't he here? Right? Yeah. And it is also true that Gandalf and Saruman, right, would presumably be among the wise, right? That everyone would acknowledge that. And so this would be another way of, so by saying the wise may have good reason, maybe that is also his way of explicitly segueing towards Gandalf. He could have just said, because Elrond has been, in as much as anyone's been running the meeting, Elrond has, right? Elrond may have good reason to believe that the halflings, Elrond was the one who was presenting the early evidence about the identity of the ring, right? So by saying the wise in general, right, speaking in the third person plural there, he would be inviting the extension to Gandalf. Tony, Gandalf has spoken up. He's the one who told Frodo to bring the ring out, right? And then Boromir will find the answer to his riddle, right? Yeah, Arden Cran, if he says, and what of the blue wizards, why are they not here? I can imagine everyone being like, just like bursting into giggles when he says that. But Jennifer, I think that you're absolutely right. It sounds like while Frodo wanted to hear more about Gandalf, Galdor wanted to hear more from Gandalf. Yes, I agree. And in that way, I do think that so I don't think that Galdor is being clueless. I don't think this is a segue, which is just not a segue at all, right? Frodo says, I want to hear about Gandalf, and Galdor is like, me too. I want to hear about everything other than Gandalf, right? I don't think it's just a non-segue. But I do think what he is doing is broadening on that, right? I don't know. It's not, I don't just want to hear where has Gandalf been the last couple months, right? What I want to know is, I want to hear him explain. I want to hear Gandalf explain. How can we be sure that the ring that Isildur lost is the ring that Bilbo found? And I also want to know where Saruman is. And maybe he's heard that Gandalf has returned from Isengard, right? And so, yes, both of these things would be an explicit invitation to ask Gandalf. Tessa says, does anyone here even know the blue wizards exist? No. And that, of course, includes Tolkien. So there we are. Yeah, nobody knows anything about the blue wizards. Druid's Fire, they definitely did not exist at this time. The blue wizards don't exist at all until Gandalf makes that comment. When Gandalf says the rods of the five wizards in his speech to Saruman, Tolkien had no idea who the five wizards were. And at that point, it's up to him to figure out who the five wizards are, right? That kind of thing happens all the time to Tolkien, right? When characters open their mouths and say things, and he's like, what does that mean? No idea. I better figure that out, right? And of course, they're not even mentioned as being blue until later, right? I mean, that's nowhere in the Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit. So, that's the not only the first reference to it in the text, but it would seem the first indicator of them. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. No, Fourth Dauntless, I do not believe it's in the appendices. I think that the blue wizards are only associated with the color blue in Unfinished Tales. Did Peter Jackson get in trouble for that? No, I don't think so. I mean, they'd have to have been feeling really litigious to go after him with that. But yeah. JJ says they'd have had to watch the movies to notice it. Oh, ouch. But anyway, okay. Yeah. No, Nathan, I mean, it's clear that there are other wizards, 2 other unaccounted for wizards. What is nowhere in The Lord of the Rings is their association with the color blue. That's all. Yeah, there's clearly some missing wizards. But anyway, okay. Let us end just in thinking about his references to Saruman here. What of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel if he knows the things that we have heard? Can we call in the expert witness here? Right? Yeah, let's call in the expert witness. And it is this that leads me to believe that Galdor is not a plant, by the way. I don't think he's just been put up to say this by either Gandalf or Elrond. I think that he genuinely wants to know, right? He is a reflection of how, like, the elves in general trust Saruman and respect him, right? For his learning, and especially for his learning about the Rings of Power, right? What is his counsel if he knows the things that we have heard? But that undermines the idea that he's calling for Gandalf, because we were suggesting that when he says, may we not hear the proofs, that is Galdor's way of saying, can we let Gandalf talk already? Right? But it seems like what he's saying is, can we not hear the proofs? And shouldn't Saruman be the one giving us the proofs? Right? I mean, if anybody can connect the dots, right? We've heard about Bilbo finding the ring and giving it to Frodo, and we've heard what happened to Frodo. We've heard about Isildur losing the ring. Surely, if anybody can fill in that gap, right, between them that's been left, fill in the gap in a way that would prove that the Halfling's Trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, then it would be Saruman, right? Why is he not here? What would he say? What does he say? Yeah. And yet, Nathan, I do agree that having a plant would be a strange rhetorical necessity for Elrond. Yeah, it would. I mean, that's obviously kind of a joking suggestion, but yeah, basically, it's now kind of undermining my convictions that perhaps this was a good segue after all. Maybe it's not. Maybe, again, back to interpretation A, that when Frodo says, I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf, Galdor says, I still want to know a good deal too. Less about the Gandalf thing, but the more about the wanting to know things, right? Yeah. Right, exactly. Fourth Dauntless, I think maybe then we can all agree that it was his lack of skill at segues that excluded Galdor from being among the wise in the first place. Yeah. Though I guess, yes, Cosmic, you're right. Perhaps we could argue that he is, it's like he's saying yes and no at the same time, right? So maybe he's good at that. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. No. So I want to talk about the use of the word trove, but we're out of time. So I'm gonna stop here, because if I don't, then we won't ever stop, and it's getting late. And I want to try not to keep you guys too late. So we're gonna stop there. We shall resume this next time, looking at maybe tidying up one or two things about Galdor's perhaps less than perfectly skillful segue. And indeed, I am very interested in the phrase, the halfling's trove, right? But of course, also, we need to look towards the answer by Elrond, and then, of course, maybe we'll get to the beginning of Gandalf's speech. But my goodness, didn't we do like 3? Holy cow, we did 2.5. Fully 2.5 slides tonight. I feel like I need to mop my brow here, for crying out loud. That was the most headlong session we've had in a long time. But anyway. Okay. Wow, 336 whole words, aren't us? How did we do it? Unbelievable. Well, we skipped 1 or 2, I guess. But anyway, okay. So, but I'm going to stop there. So I'm gonna say goodnight to the folks in the Talon and the folks on Twitter. Feel free to join us, twitch.tv/SignumU, for our field trip, as we're going to head back up to Angmar and continue exploring around there in the greater Himbar region in the Lord of the Rings Online. So, all right. Thank you, Twitter folks. Oh, hang on.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, Valori. Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. People are reporting already, so I guess we're going to Gathforthnear?
Gathforthnear, yes.
All right.
Let us meet at the stable master in front of Gathforthnear.
Yep. We'll wait a bit so you guys can take stables if you need to take stables.
Yes.
So I want to know, are all elves this passive aggressive? Like, I'm not just I'm not just being cute about it either. I'm just like, is that a typical way for elves to show displeasure, saying something like, well, I guess I'm not smart enough to believe what seems to me like, a lie, because I'm not as clever as all you guys.
Well, it's one of the things that it means to say both no and yes, right? I mean, it's, they're used to conveying their points indirectly, right? Mm-hmm.
It does make you kind of realize why the dwarves think that kind of language is just deceitful in nature.
Right. Intended to deceive. Yeah.
I get the feeling that while they had the discussion, and the people who kept stopping for details were the dwarves, because I just heard The Hobbit read out loud this last week, done by Andy Serkis,
yes,
raising money. So, and I recall that constantly the dwarves would interrupt Bilbo and demand more details.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's right. It's the roving threats. Okay.
Yeah. Remember
right.
those?
Yeah. So I was not able to tune in to Andy Serkis's reading, though I was really glad that it was happening. And
it was like on a different time zone for us Americans. So.
Right. Well, and that was okay, but yeah, I just didn't have the time. But maybe it will be. It would be awfully nice if they put that up for sale with the proceeds going to charity as well.
Well, it was a 12-hour marathon, so by the end he was a little punch drunk by the end of it. But
Right.
yes, I really hope this does give way to an official audiobook recording.
Yeah.
Because I loved his voices. I got to tune in about when he started Mirkwood,
Ah.
and I, thanks to Andy, I got to hear what was lacking in the movie, which was drunk elves.
Drunk elves.
Like, one of them swore. I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, that was a swear word. Tosspot.
Tosspot. Yeah.
Tosspot. That was a particularly dirty word.
Yeah.
Well, when it was one of those, it would have been sort of okay for the kids when Tolkien wrote it, but when he was a kid, that was a pretty vulgar swear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly rude, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm forgetting. Did we decide to go to Imlad Balchorth or to go down to Barad Gularan first?
We tossed out a lot of options.
We sure did. Maybe we should go back to Imlad Balchorth.
Okay. Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah, we did look at a lot of it because we discovered that library on the hill that we'd never seen.
Exactly. Well, because there's a lot down there, but we already started that one, so rather than taking on a whole new region, let's go back there. It'll take us a few weeks to do it all, but
yeah. Well, I was surprised today. We went at a fair clip.
Yeah, tonight
I have like
absolutely
5 sentences on my write-up.
Yeah, I was feeling frisky tonight. Okay, am I still headed
It's
in
springtime,
right
the
way?
only pretty ring time.
Okay, there's our little village. Go to the pond and bear left. All right.
It is funny to hear Bilbo act so writerly as well, and know, like, me, myself, and like all of my writer friends were kind of like this, where it's just kind of like, yes, pain and suffering, but tell me, how did it feel? Use words, lots of words.
Right.
Like I was thinking about the time that I like injured my leg. I didn't break it, but I darn near almost did. And yeah, I was sitting there waiting for the ambulance, so I'm thinking they're going, what kind of words would I use to describe this later?
Right.
Because I'm sure this will be a great passage in the book.
Right.
No, I think was it a leg or was it a root canal? I think it was both, probably.
Right. Both. Right.
But yeah, so I wonder if some of Bilbo's little sillier foibles with talking about writing constantly, I wonder if he's kind of making fun of himself and his writer chums a bit.
Well, I mean, it is interesting the ways in which Bilbo, pretty transparently, is his stand-in, right? So especially in the Lord of the Rings phase, right?
Yes.
With the poetry business and him sort of teasing himself with his desire about writing poetry, the reception of his poetry by his family, by his extended family at the party. The teasing with Aragorn. There's a lot of elements where you can see Bilbo as a kind of stand-in. Anyway, so I'm just pausing here as we're entering the valley to look around myself and remember what we were looking at. We've got up on the hill here next to us some old monoliths, right, which looks back to the very ancient days. We can see far ahead of us some ruins which are clearly older than that. Let's start up on the hill over here.
If I recall, we see a lot of the same architectural designs and patterns and motifs that we saw in the Barrow Downs.
Right. Is this the way up? Yeah, this is the way up, right?
Is it? If you find a way up.
Yeah, this is the way up. Or at least a way up.
Well done, sir.
All right. Oh, look, there's a torch up here.
An ominous torch. Is it another lich factory?
No. It's the dwarf camp. There it is, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I want to get my bearings from here. So now, Longbeards. The arch is very longbeardy.
Uh-huh.
Right, I don't have to see the dwarves. So, but now notice a couple things. First of all, notice that this stone wall has been reinforced by what looks like iron on top of it.
Yeah. Well, even the name indicates that it's some sort of protection. Worth meaning like a place that is guarded.
Mm-hmm.
Rewarded.
Right, and of
Oh,
course,
yeah,
I was noticing around the on the outside, the spikes on the wall. We didn't see that anywhere in Ered Luin. Nowhere in the dwarf domains did we see anything like spikes on the walls like this. Now, there were fewer, of the Walking Dead in that region.
Yeah, they ain't taking no chances here.
Yeah, they've even put spikes along the top of the wall. Not on the very top of the wall, right? They're not trying to keep pigeons off. They're just...
Or Marivale. Failed
Right.
to take that into account, did you, boys?
Some of those spikes are missing.
Yeah, it implies they've met their target.
Yeah, and there's another one right there that's broken off halfway through. So yeah, these spikes are actually used.
They work.
Yeah. And then there
Yeah, some of the ones on the top are missing too.
are great bloody gaps in the wall. Like there's not to mention the huge arches with no gates. So
It looks like they need to get wagons up here or something.
as a defensive fortification, I'm kind of plus minus on their preparations here, but
Yeah, what do they do? Have a door they put in there? Doesn't look like there's any underground entrances, like not that I can see.
And what's up with the flames? I mean, look at the rainbow effect. What are they burning?
Yeah, what are they
in that?
burning?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's not quite as evil looking as the flames in the white factories.
True.
But
you can see why I mistook it with the green and purple aspects.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's friendlier rainbow flames instead of the ominous sullen green flames, but
Prismatic.
and there's nothing in here.
It implies there's more underground, but where did it come from and where did they lead out? I suppose they have some sort of hidden entrance underground?
Yeah, they'd have to. No, there's nothing really up here. And these are just large torch holders, I guess?
I guess. It implies that they're on their way to both... it implies that they're trying to get to one of the dwarven camps along here. Like, this is the road. It looks like this is more like a way station on a road.
Yeah, I mean, there is nothing here. There's 2 pop tents and that's it.
Yeah, they're
There's
just
no goods,
protecting
there's no wagons.
their investments.
Yeah. There's
See
no
what any of these
buildings,
guys
there's
say.
no doors. I mean, we've got a perfectly
This is-
respectable cliffside and there's no indication of delvings here.
Okay, so here we go. It's the main route between Carndum and Ranjuath, which leads to the southern lands and bears much of Angmar traffic. Messengers and patrols move along this path, winding through the haunted ways of Imlad Balchorth.
That's the road down there that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps because of the dread of that place, the traffic through Imlad Balchorth is lightly guarded. I would ask you to find the Angmar patrols and messengers and waylay them. So...
Right.
they're asking me to keep the roads clear of Angmar spies.
Right. Oh boy, we do have some lovely views from up here, though.
They're talking about messengers in Angmar, but they're also talking about dwarven communications running through here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess this is the place you take out messengers from the enemy while maintaining a message route yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I guess
It's
so.
like
I
a
mean, and this
bar or a sofa.
it clearly does overlook the road, right? So it's not that this camp itself is on a road between one place and another place, but it's right along next to the road, so that the dwarves would be.
The necropolis is almost beautiful up here.
Yeah. Okay, so from here we can see straight across, so straight to the west from us. We can see that slightly evil Tudor house on the cliffside that we saw last time, right? That's where that second Cargul was.
Outside of Carndum.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very confident that that's the building we were looking out from over Imlad Balchorth last week. And then from here we can see that at least two different layers of archaeology, like two different archaeological layers, right? We've got the larger, buildings, tombs, and then we've got all these old monoliths.
Yeah. Well, you remember we found dead ruins that looked like this outside of Dweland as well?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
What was that? That was let's see. That was near the Ward Spire.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, which was a dwarvish building.
There's a dwarvish building, but we found evidence of men as well there too.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, nearby. Right. Yes. Huh.
Because
okay.
we had the whites there and the runes.
So it looks like the dwarves travel this road, and they've built this little enclave up here so this is basically just like a dwarven camping spot.
/ way station, yeah.
Yeah. Here's a slightly more protected spot, well lit because of the pervasive
with
gloom.
station guards too.
Right, exactly. Okay. That makes sense. Should we look around there? Because there are other things up here in the hills, aren't there?
I think so, yeah.
We might as well. I know we came in from the other direction. I don't think, did we look around up here?
I don't know. I think the necropolis is about where we left off last time.
Yeah, that's where we came in, down the other way. That's where we came in before, from the south. Yeah. I don't remember at all. I know there's a thing up here. There's like a door and a place you can go in, but I don't really have any memory of how you get there.
This fair area so infrequently, I'm not sure I know. We're having an adventure.
Oh no, this is just the way around to that road.
Yeah, this is you have two roads here. You either take the dead road or the full of wargs road.
Oh. So this is the road, right, this is the road that heads out to Barad Gularan. This is the Barad Gularan road, and then this one is the dead road that goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where we came in before. Okay. Well, I wanted to go and look at this arch again anyway.
Yeah, there's the sort of bat-nosed wolf motif that we saw before.
And the swirly monoliths like we see in the Barrow Downs. So they're evidence of the most ancient human cultures that we've seen any evidence of.
This time with decorative gold accents.
Yes. Which are pretty much the same. Those like wolf or bat or whatever the faces are there are they are. So is that a rune? A green rune? on the square on the top of the arch there.
Looks like someone chopped something over it.
Kind of does.
It matches this Angmar metal over here. I seem to think we recalled that these were quiet dead that were disturbed by Angmar thing because of these new metal elements.
Right, the new
on
spikes,
here.
yeah, which are very much new Angmar. And it's got the Cairo.
Yep.
Just like the bridge by Elrond.
Yeah. And yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
And the other bridge where was it? By the fishing place. Yeah. Noglond.
Right. And I was just going to say that those wolf heads or whatever they were on that arch up there, isn't that the same general artistic style as tombs that we see that have the Gryffindors?
Oh, Gryffindor. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you're getting all Harry Potter on.
Yeah. The tombs where they bury the Gryffindors. Yeah, that's exactly it. Not the tomb where
giving Gryffindor's proclivity to run into trouble.
Exactly. Very full up tombs. Okay.
And here's us Ravenclaws examining everything.
Right. I know that we've looked at these before. This one is really weird.
Really intricate.
It's got the same door in there.
Lots of patches.
Yeah.
It's like it kept becoming structurally unsound. They just stuck more bits on it.
Yeah, from a distance, this tomb.
It's kind of Baroque.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of looks like the it kind of looked like the place where they stored all the columns, for use in other tombs, basically.
Yeah, the pile of headstones to come in handy whenever they needed it.
Exactly, it almost looks like that. But right, okay, so I remember that we were speculating, based on these initial tombs, that this place was originally a burying ground by the ancestors of the Hillmen, who were presumably the same ancestors as the ancestors of the Brelanders, right? Who made their tombs originally in the Barrow Hills before the Dunedain ever came. And so similarly, these ancient tombs were here in this valley from before even the comparatively modern society of the Hillmen. But see, there are the Gryffindors right there.
Yep.
And then they were taken over by the modern Angmar and presumably cursed by them, and that's why we've got all these dead folks walking around, right? Because
that funny little Squidward door in the middle there.
Yes.
It's beautiful design elements.
Yeah. And we've seen these, so we saw these. This is also very like the ancient tombs that we saw in Dunland and Enidwaith, which were also, of course, full of the Walking Dead, as tomb places in the game tend to be.
And people descended from Hillmen.
Absolutely. So
these guys they put skulls in these ones.
Oh yeah, decorated with skulls, though with similar carvings that we see in other places. These are what, like the
sarcophagi.
Right. Well, these are like the discount ones, right? Like the low rent tombs. Compared to the other ones?
But it's still better than a hole in the ground.
Well, yeah, sure, better than a hole in the ground, sure. And presumably also better than these freestanding sarcophagi, right? Yes. Which are themselves better than a hole in the ground, but...
this one you get immortality. It's all about being remembered.
These are the wolf heads that are sticking out, right?
Yeah.
Look at the fresh blood
it's almost
on
like
this.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's got this werewolf attack streaks all over it.
Yeah.
The wolf heads on the end, they almost look like slide a pole in there. And carry
Yeah,
it
I was
around.
thinking of that, of carrying poles. You probably, like with the little hook that the wolves have under their chins, you actually could hook a bar under there sideways and hold it up.
Yeah.
Don't know if that would hold the weight of a stone sarcophagus, which would be considerable.
No, but it'd get it on a wagon, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
You know if these guys invented the wheel?
Well, lots of circles in their designs, but
I figure any place that has a good, clear amount of land and lots of hills has figured out the wheel.
probably. And I mean, and this stone is not native. I mean, they imported this stone from somewhere. It does not look like it came from here. I mean, here is all the like obsidian walls and stuff.
Yeah, you could see the new stone sticking out of the native stone.
Yeah, the light gray on the very dark gray. Yeah. There's no evidence on the whites themselves. They're just the same fairly gross guys that we saw elsewhere, right?
Except they're very brightly colored, these ones. The zombies are much more virulent green and purple.
Oh, look at that nice stripy loincloth he's wearing, too.
Oh, very fashionable.
Yeah. He's making a real statement.
Must be a brindled warg if it's got stripes on it.
Okay, I see where we've looped back around. Great.
Mhm.
Let's go up on the hill over there, the hill that we were looking at from the side when we first came in, which we could see from up on the hill by the dwarves. We could see all of the steps leading up to it. Are those dogs, are those bar guests again?
Yes, that's a Barghest again.
Okay, yeah. All right, yeah, and these still look the same. Interesting that we have a wooden ramp. This looks, I mean, look
Gold
at how,
accents.
right, look at how worn down these stairs are.
Yeah, I love that detail.
Yeah. And and we've got the curly Q designs. I mean, this part of the stairway is ancient. The wooden part is less ancient. So who built the wooden part?
I don't know, but they wanted to put gold on it. So, obviously it was, I'm going to say those sorcerers, maybe the first go around to the Angmar sorcerers.
Right, old Angmar, maybe.
Yeah.
What do you
It
make
is
of
gold
this
after all.
purplish stuff? Is this like clay? Did they put some kind of,
It's
like-
plaster.
yeah, plaster? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like plaster over brick.
Okay.
Maybe maybe it needed shoring up, or maybe it's not plaster and it's more cement or mortar at this point. Like they're
Right. Maybe.
repatching some
Yeah,
of these up.
that purple color is very characteristic of this whole bank. We see it everywhere here. But
Yeah.
other than that, we're seeing similar stuff. I'm not seeing much more of that new Angmar metal. Oh, we've got folks jumping out the ground here. Iron-bound archers. So they're iron-bound, thus making explicit what was already implied, right?
Yeah.
Which is that this is an ancient burial ground which predates Angmar by a lot, right? But which, being so conveniently near to the center of power of the Witch King, he has done his thing and set dark spirits loose around here, like he did
Just
in
your
Barrow.
run-of-the-mill necromancy.
Exactly. Okay.
Some people just want to make friends and raise a family.
Right. That's what necromancers do? Make friends and
Yeah.
raise the family?
Make friends and raise families.
Makes sense. Yeah.
A lot of these little puddles. These don't look quite like the alkaline blue that we've seen in other places.
No.
Implying that this is a different kind of muck.
Yeah, you're right. Different from, not like Malinhad and not even like the green lake right next to Gathforthnir. Notice the like weird, like metallic sort of reflective quality in the water here.
Yeah, it seems kind of slimy.
Yeah, something, and that, yeah, like as this
unwholesome.
This little spot here suggests.
This little gas escape.
That's an active thing, right? Not
It's like the bog of stench.
It is just like the bog of stench.
Bog of eternal stench. That's
yeah,
what it is.
Yeah. Oh, hey, look! It's one of those little standing sarcophagi.
Yeah, I remember
we
these
saw a
guys.
bunch of those in Dunland.
And these are the ones that we saw in Ered Luin that made us go, wait a minute, we've seen these.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. Back in the area in Ered Luin that made us think that they were probably that the men on their way across the mountains had maybe paused there. Okay, now what's up with the blue?
Oh yeah, I remember seeing these. It was like special stone, and look, it's got the iron crown on it.
Carved right on it, yeah, natively. So yeah.
So this is definitely big mugwump here.
Right, and this is an altar. So we've got a sacrificial altar next to whatever this is. What even is this?
I can't tell if this is corrosion of the metal or like some sort of if this is like some sort of stone with like lapis in it.
Right, yeah, like lapis. When you said, I remember we were seeing this up on the hill, right? Like on the city overlooking the cliffs. Some of the stone was in use up there.
Mm-hmm.
But it clearly is being used by the Angmarim, and I'm going to say old Angmarim. This doesn't look new.
The carvings look pretty fresh.
Well, but a little bit worn down, though. I mean, I think it's. I mean, they don't look like. I mean, obviously, nothing like these tombstones.
Fair.
Not rounded.
Yeah, and they're in a
like
style
the
we
other
haven't
stuff,
seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is unique to this area.
My theory is that those are old Angmar. So the Angmarim came and they built some kind of fane, some kind of altar, unholy spot here. And we see the active bubbling up of something gross underneath the water here. As we're continuing, I think we're continuing. I don't think I've doubled back.
It makes me wonder if it's like a tomb that was meant to be a function of some kind. Like we buried a new person here who is now going to be like the general of all these ghosts.
Yeah, I wonder. See, now this is different and new. Look at this.
I haven't studied necromancy, so I'm just spitballing here, honestly.
Right. This. Is this a door? Or just a plinth? I can't even tell if this arch is...
I think it's a plinth. I thought it was a backup.
But yeah, this is definitely a completely Angmarim construction. And oh,
yeah, I remember seeing this statue.
Look at that statue.
It was the hooded woman.
Yeah, the hooded woman statue.
Yeah. We've seen her.
Yeah. Edith says there are little skulls carved into the side. Into the side of what? The tomb thing? The altar thing? Is that supposed to be a Marthiel? It doesn't look like the other statues, which I presume, like the one at the gates at the, between the North Downs and Angmar.
No, it's much more simplistic in style, and it's made out of that stone we can't identify.
Yeah, with the blue.
Mm-hmm.
So,
makes you wonder if they have some perception of the Valors, but maybe they get them all wrong. Like maybe this is supposed to be Nienda, and instead of healing with tears, it's grief and awe and depression or something.
I don't know, but I mean, unless the Angmarim came and just like carved the iron crown onto those other structures, that we just were seeing by the Bog of Eternal Stench. Unless they, again, just like desecrated that altar with the sign of the Iron Crown, then the structures in this stone, in this blue veined stone, are old Angmarim structures. Which would mean that this statue would be... Now, this statue stylistically looks like it would fit with the old tombs. Oh, look, she's holding her hands up.
It's a little more proportional than the very abstract-ish looking.
Right, like the sarcophagus guy who's as wide as he is tall?
Yeah.
Katrana says it almost seems like a sinister version of the Elbereth statues in Rivendell.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's what made me think of they have a perception of the Valar with the Númenorian ties, but maybe this is like a twisted version of them. Maybe they're aping, just like evil does, it apes.
Maybe. Wait, Edith, the whole side of what building is skulls? This building? Whoa, yeah.
Oh, that's metal.
Whoa. Yikes.
See, this is the step below the sarcophagus option and the decoration option.
Right.
This is the crammed in a wall with the abates option.
Ro, you said this is the real discount version.
This is the budget option. Yeah, I mean, look how much standing water's around here. I think burying it in holes is probably not a great idea.
No, I think it's probably not a good idea. But see, this is not, though, the same. I mean, structurally, this is not only much newer, but it's totally different from the older tombs.
Yeah.
This is built within the old Angmarim period. The skull, Castle Grayskull over here, like, or Black Skull, I guess, would be more accurate. Both of these, right, are Angmarim.
It implies there was some great event where they were burying dead so fast they had to stick them in a wall. Or dig up who was down there and replace them.
Carve them. I mean, they could just be carved skulls.
That's no fun.
Yeah.
Oh man, look at all the effects.
Back to the ancient tombs. Wait, and who are these guys? These guys are dread mists. I'm not sure I know what that means. What is a dread mist?
It's a terrible. So it's a terrible dread mist.
Whoa. Now that water is green.
Yeah,
look,
that might be no touchy water at all.
Stay out of the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, don't drink the lime Kool-Aid.
Oh, we've got to get down there. Where's this? Okay.
Well, we could try to hop it. Yeah, look at all of the lady statues on there. And they have a whole wall of this blue stuff filled with skulls.
We're combining all the things there, right? You got the blue veined stone, you've got the skull wall in behind it, and you've got the lady statues.
The people in the blue wall are more important than the people in the black wall. And
a big, whole, ginormous modern Angmarim metal spike in the middle.
Yeah.
So big I almost missed it. Just mistaking it for a cropping of rock. Yeah, I'm tempted to jump down, but let's try to find a more orderly way in there. Here's another one of these smaller things with the Angmarim stamp on them again.
Yeah. It looks like an easy bake oven. Like you put a body in there and out comes a zombie.
Right, except, normally there's creepy fire associated with that, and we don't see any of that.
That's true. We haven't had any of the lich factories with the smokestacks on.
Sorry, I saw these carvings down here, and I was wondering if those might be skulls.
Okay, so this water is so scary it takes your voice away. That's how nasty this water is. You're just sitting there going, oh, blah.
Right. And all of these are associated with mists.
Well, we're standing in a body of water, so.
Right, but so, right, they look like the creatures that we met in Garthagarwen, right?
Enslaved by the Red Lady.
Yes. And so there we were dealing explicitly with water spirits which had been corrupted and twisted. And so I'm wondering what these guys are. Is there a backstory given to these dread mist things? Can anybody read me from like a deed text or a quest text? Anybody who can tell me more about these, the in-game storyline of these dread mists, I'd be really interested to hear that. There are dread waters around too?
It does make me wonder if these statues of the lady are similar to the Red Lady. Like maybe this is the Blue Lady and it's the same thing where she's enslaved to these nature spirits.
Yeah, I'm still just trying to figure out how that works because... Yeah, see, notice how she is backed up right up against the new Angmarim building? I think the Blue Ladies have to be Angmarim.
Yeah.
They clearly do. They are not, although stylistically they could be, if they were in light gray stone, I might think that they were original from the ancients here.
Not enough swirls and stuff in them.
Right, right. But...
And like I said, while simplistic, it's proportional and looks accurate, unlike some of the more stylistic stuff we get from the Hellman graves.
Oh man, I can't keep going down.
Where are the stairs? I think we have to go down the big stairs.
Alright, so we gotta loop back around? Okay.
Yep.
Well, it is getting late. It's almost time to let everybody go. We're not gonna be able to finish everything today. Okay.
Oh, big tree.
What's in the tree? It's just a dead spot?
Fungus or something. But yeah, look, another mockery of the white tree.
Yeah.
It is interesting that seeing all these places, the only places we've seen white trees are where they've been blighted and dying.
That's true. A white tree is a bad sign. So far.
Remember on the drive from Pennsylvania, we'd go by and there's this whole forest with just nothing but white dead wood. I kept thinking that's what Farnos looks like.
Right.
It's grown and green since then, thank goodness.
Okay, see, one of these is a spiteful fell spirit. And this is an enraged fell spirit. So presumably these fell
implying
spirits...
that they've been disturbed. Yeah, they've been disturbed by...
imported, right? Like these are the spirits, like these are, who have not yet animated a body or something.
You think they brought the water with them, or the water part of it?
No, I think, well, if I'm understanding properly the implications of the dread mists, it is that this was a water-intense place anyway.
And just hence all the stone sarcophagi. Hence all the different burial modes.
Right, so here we are at the base of the big, huge new Angmarim spike.
Oh, dang. Oh, you're right. I didn't even see that. It just looked...
Yeah, it creeps up on you because it's so huge.
Gosh almighty. Yeah, this is exactly like the one they had in Anuminous.
There's another one right through here.
It's like a crossbow bolt. Don't touch the Kool-Aid.
Will you die?
Yeah.
You just drop dead instantly if you touch the water?
I'm not sure if there's a time thing. Yeah? Okay. I'll go with Druid on this one, yes.
Okay. Alright. Interesting.
Anyone want to test it out for us, for science?
Yeah, so these, wow, so that was, what we were looking at before was not even the most corrupted water around.
Nope. There's worse water than this.
Okay.
Whoa, so much nasty. There we go, 2 giant white trees again.
Yeah. 2 giant trees. Now, who are these folks down here?
It's a
Fettered
courtyard,
spirits and elder fettered spirits. Hey guys, so these spirits have been chained here somehow?
Mm-hmm. By what?
Well, it's gotta be by the will of the Witch King, you'd think. And this whole
We've seen
island...
physical evidence, though.
Yeah, this whole island, all of the kind of inner sanctum here, right, is all
Might be those,
ancient.
might be those 2 giant metal edifices is what keeps everything like it's some sort of...
Yeah, so like spiritual anchors, right?
Yeah. Don't go past the poles.
Right. Right.
Once you cross that bridge, my friend.
But then there's that wall and all of those lady statues.
Uh-huh.
With the wall and all the blue wall and all the blue ladies and all the skulls. It's a whole skull wall, right? With then the blue wall with more skulls up on top. And then the blue ladies. So this pretty much is, right? The corrupted heart of Imlad Balchorth?
Yeah, pretty much. I would agree with that.
So you have to imagine, look, and we're right underneath that Tudor house up on the hill there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so...
Seemed much less scary up there. Oh, something worth mentioning, too. We do know that the Witch King and some of his servants, there's a lady general in their midst as well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think this could be an interpretation of her, right?
Amarthio. That would be Amarthio,
that's
right?
what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't
Sorry,
think
I got
so.
it mixed up with the Malthea from Last Unicorn.
Right, yeah. No, I don't think so. I don't. Again, she
Okay.
looks different. She's more military. She's the one who's depicted with armor and...
Well, it's always the color red, so...
Yes, and always the color red. Yeah.
No, just throwing that out there.
So it's interesting because this was... So I'm imagining that in the ancient days, right, when this tomb was originally built, it would have been the...
Watch out, watch out!
I know, I'm not going to back all the way. Quite. Okay, so that this would have been like perhaps the royal tomb, right, with these enormous ancient trees flanking it, and it set in the wall and all this, so that big wall wasn't there, but still the multiple layers coming down, and this still feels, even without the wall, feels like a kind of holy of holies kind of thing in here, right?
The fact it's an island, these bridges were obviously built later, gives it that sort of Avalon feel.
Yes. Then the old Angmarim built the wall and the statues. And then the new Angmarim erected the big anchor towers.
Honkin' fish hooks, yeah.
The enormous fish hooks. And I can only presume that both of them, both the old Angmarim constructions and the new Angmarim fish hooks, have all contributed to the corruption of this place.
Yep.
And the tainting of it for evil. Which as a burial place, it wouldn't necessarily just be.
Quite the opposite.
I'm also interested in the relatively small amount of dread we have here. I would have expected more. We're only at level 1.
We're pretty high level.
Dread. Yeah, I guess so. That might be it. Okay.
I guess it implies that these are ancient spirits, but they're, the ill will they have is maybe manufactured or something. I don't know.
Right.
Fettered,
Yeah.
fettered.
Exactly. They're fettered. Yeah. These spirits are imprisoned.
These aren't Yeah, these aren't the enraged spirits. These are just sad spirits.
Yes, exactly. They're pitiable. Absolutely. Okay. Cool. Well,
like
next
a
week we'll
ghost in a
continue
Christmas
here in
Carol.
Imlad Balchorth. We'll look for up in the library and stuff. I know there's stuff higher up here that we can find.
Yep.
I needed to remind myself of the layout here and I don't just mean the map. I mean the architectural layout and what we're seeing around here. But we can try to finish up this area next week. All right. Now I'll let everybody go. Keeping everybody late again. Thanks for joining me. Fun excursion among the dead here in Angmar after a fun Hobbit discussion from earlier this evening. So thanks everybody for joining me, and I will see you guys again next Tuesday. Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.